Hi, I'm going to be reading chapter 11 from My Brother Sam is Dead. What will happen? I don't know. Let's find out. Okay, chapter 11. Dr. Hobart saddled up and rode down to the tavern, and I walked back slowly. There wasn't any hurry now. Mostly, I tried to put out of my mind what I'd seen. I went out to the barn and cleaned myself up as best I could, and then I went into the tap room. It was full of people who'd come to talk about the British raid. The wounded man was still alive. The ball had hit him high in his ribs and had stuck there without damaging him much. Dr. Hobart gave him a huge mug of rum, and when he'd drunk that down and it had had a chance to work, 4 men held the man down flat on a table while Dr. Hobart sliced open the wound and pulled the ball out with his forceps. "A couple of broken ribs," he said, "but they'll knit." He bound the man tightly, and we propped him up with some comforters in front of the fire and gave him some more rum and something to eat. He was pretty drunk, but he told us his story. "They're after the munitions and stored in Danbury," he said. "I came up here to warn the militia. We thought somebody might stop them, but I was too late." Dr. Hobart shook his head. "A wasted errand," he said. The train band is pretty thin here." "I know," the wounded man said, "but we were expecting some Continental troops. You've heard of General Benedict Arnold, I expect. He and General Silliman and some others have been chasing the British up from Campo and Fairfield. They were hoping somebody would slow them down until they could catch up. Although I don't know what good it would do. They haven't got the men to take on that bunch of lobsterbacks." I took a deep breath. Sam was with Benedict Arnold's troops, or at least he had been. "Sir, you mean General Arnold's troops are coming through Reading?" "That was the plan. Of course, you can't ever tell what's going to happen in war. Things change a lot." I knew it was foolish to believe that Sam might be with General Arnold's troops, but when you want something bad enough, you can't stop yourself from hoping. I wondered if Mother remembered that Sam was with Arnold. I didn't think she would. She wouldn't have paid any attention to something like that. I went to the window and looked out. It had clouded over and was beginning to rain. A man was running across the training ground. In a moment, I saw that it was Captain Betts. He came swiftly toward the tavern, opened the door, and came in. "Stephen," somebody said, "you escaped." "They let some of us go," he said. "How many?" "9. They let most of us go. They only kept 3. "Is Jerry Sanford all right, sir?" He shook his head. "They kept him. Don't ask me why. They kept a boy." "They kept Jerry? What will they do with him, sir?" "I don't know," he said gruffly. "What's happened here?" "They've gone off north toward Danbury," somebody told him. "They burnt Starr's house and killed some people there." "Dan Starr? They killed Dan Starr?" "Yes." Captain Betts looked grim and hard. "The bastards! We can still catch them. I'm going to get the train band out. We'll follow them through the fields and cut them down from behind the walls. Tim, go over and ring the church bell. Get cracking." I didn't want to get into it, but I had to obey. I started toward the door, but my mother grabbed my collar. "No, no," she said, "not my boy. You don't involve any more Meekers in this terrible war. Send your own child out to play soldier if you want, Stephen Betts, but no more of mine." Betts stared at Mother. "Where's your patriotism, woman?" "Bah, patriotism. Your patriotism has got my husband in prison and one of my children out there in the rain and the muck shooting people and likely to be dead any minute, and my business half ruined. Go sell your patriotism elsewhere. I've had enough of it." "They're killing your neighbors, Susanna," Captain Betts shouted. "They've killed Dan Starr." "Then there's enough dead already." "Tim," he started. Mother snatched up the poker from the fireplace. "Leave my boy alone, Stephen Betts," she said. She raised the poker over her head. I knew from the mad look in her eye that she would hit Captain Betts if she had to. "Mother," I said. "The devil on you," Betts said. "I can't fool with you any longer." Then he turned and strode out of the tavern, banging the door behind him. A few minutes later, the church bell began to toll the alarm. The people in the tavern began to leave. Some of them I knew belonged to the train band and were going off to get their weapons. A lot of the others just smelled trouble and wanted to get clear of it. Pretty soon there were only a couple of men left. The wounded man had fallen asleep by the fire. Outside, the wind had begun to blow the rain against the windows. Night was falling. Mother sat down at the table and put her head in her hands. "Timothy, I want to pray. Come here and pray with me." She took my hand and pulled me down on the bench beside her. I put my head down. "Oh, Lord," she said, "please take this war away from here. What have we done to endure this? Why must it go on so long? What have we done in thy sight to deserve this evil?" She stopped, but there was no answer, and after a moment she raised her eyes, got up, and began to slice some onions into the stew pot for supper. And an hour later, as I was getting hungry and wondering when supper would be ready, we heard distant sounds again, the sounds of marching men and horses trotting, and orders being shouted. I looked at Mother. The wounded man by the fire raised his eyes. "They're coming back again," he said. "Maybe it's the train band," I said, but my heart was pounding, and I knew who I hoped it was. I ran out into the yard. It was nearly full dark, and the rain splattered in squalls against my face. I looked down the Fairfield road. It was hard to make out much, but indistinctly I could see a body of men coming toward us. I pulled back into the shadow of the house and watched them come up. After a while I began to make out the shapes of the ones on horseback. I could tell by their hats that they weren't redcoats. I darted back into the tavern. "They're Continentals," I said. "Thank God," said the wounded man. Mother and I went to the window. The troops marched by, then broke formation and began to spread out through the village, looking for shelter from the barn out behind.